After a week hiatus, The Fosters is finally back with a new episode which features a wedding and much more. Let's get started on what happened. Alright, we are up to Season 4, Episode 16 of The Fosters, titled The Long Haul. Now in this episode, some loves are just budding, some loves are about to explode, and some loves might be over. Sounds a little dramatic, right? But it's the Fosters Addams household. So let's get started on what happens when Grandma Sharon comes to town. We open this episode with Grandma Sharon and her boyfriend Will back from one of their wild RV road trips. They drop the news on the family that they are in fact engaged. And instead of going to Vegas or something, they wanted the family to be there for the wedding. Steph and Lena say that they're kind of so busy with everything right now, there's no time for a wedding and all of this. And then Mariana kind of volunteers the house for the wedding and everything. And she says, you know what, Will and I can take care of everything. And Steph and Lena definitely look like they lost this battle and they're not too keen on having the wedding at the house in just a few days. Later, Steph and Sharon are talking and you can tell that something isn't quite right with Sharon. Then Steph asks, why don't you want to marry Will? And Sharon reveals that they're having such a good time. Why would she want to ruin it by putting a ring on it? Steph then says, why didn't you just tell him no? And Sharon says, I couldn't stand to say no and humiliate him in front of our friends when he proposed. And now she's hoping that Steph will be the bearer of the bad news. And she reveals that Will's gonna come to Steph and ask her for permission to marry Sharon. And that's when she wants Steph to tell him no. Steph is now like, oh hell no, I'm not gonna be the person that has to drop this bomb on him. You need to go talk to him. At another family dinner, which Will has nicely prepared, but no one seems to like his really healthy food, Will decides to give a toast, and then in that toast, he ends up asking Steph for permission to marry Sharon. This, of course, puts Steph in that awkward spot, and you can kind of tell that Sharon did not talk to Will at all. Steph doesn't want to ruin it in front of the entire family, so she hesitantly says, yes, you have permission to marry my mother. Grandma Sharon then kind of smiles and says, you know what, I'd be a fool to not marry Will. But come on, Grandma, you totally aren't fooling us. Flash forward now to the day of the wedding, and of course, there's a storm brewing, which no one was prepared for, and Mariana is freaking out because she wants this day to be perfect. And all of a sudden, she can't find Grandma Sharon. She goes searching for Grandma, and then she finally finds her and comes back down and says to Steph and Lena, you need to go upstairs immediately. Sharon is in the bathroom basically having a meltdown saying she can't do it, she can't marry Will. Then at long last, she finally reveals why she doesn't want to get married. Sharon tells Steph and Lena that she was madly in love with Steph's father until they got married, and then slowly, day by day, she just started to hate him and things got so bad. And so she thinks that marriage is kind of a curse and that things are so good with Will right now that if she marries Will, things might go downhill. Steph then tells Sharon, you know what, you at least owe it to Will to tell him the truth. So then later we do see Will and Sharon finally talking, kind of having the sweetest conversation. He's very understanding and a nice guy, and he tells her basically he loves her and that no matter what, even if eventually they do fall out of love with each other, they will still be best friends. And he kind of starts to recite his vows and all seems well and happy again. Now go back to the wedding outside where everyone's trying to hurry up and get everything done before the rain starts. We see everybody in their seats and Will and Sharon walk out of the house down the aisle, and at the last minute they sit down in some seats in front of Jude and everybody's a little bit confused. So Jude asks, you know what, hey Grandma, what's going on here? And that's when we see Steph and Lena walk down the aisle instead, and they get married. Now you're probably thinking, huh? I thought Steph and Lena were married. Well, you kind of got to go back quite a few episodes to remember that they ended up having to file for divorce because of the whole house thing and whatnot, I believe it was. So earlier in this episode, we see Steph get the mail, and inside that mail are the divorce papers. So Steph and Lena's divorce they filed for a while ago is now finalized, and you know, it kind of upsets Steph a little bit that this whole thing has become real. And then the way Lena kind of responds to it makes Steph think that maybe Lena wouldn't want to marry her again, because Steph says, you know, I hate that we have to do this, I want to be married to you. And Lena basically is saying like, you know what, I don't want to get married again, like why do that again? Our wedding was the happiest day of my life. Nothing else could ever be as good as that. I already have that to hold on to. And Steph says, you know what? You know, we don't need to recreate the wedding. I love you and I want to be married to you. And she goes on to explain that basically the paper, the legal marriage and the license and everything. And then Steph reveals the whole thing in itself is about more than just them. It's the whole, principle for the LGBT community and being married and the rights of being equals and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so then they end up getting married again. All seems well, they make out in the rain, and then also Grandma Sharon and Will seem to be in a good place too and are still together. Next up, let's talk about that LGBTQ Sex Ed class we left off with in the last episode that Lena was putting up flyers for. In this episode, some kids are making fun of Jude, asking him, oh, this sex ed class is gonna be at your house, or your mom's gonna demonstrate to the class what should happen. And of course, this makes Jude mad and uncomfortable. So when he goes home, he tells the moms, do we really have to have this class here? The kids are making fun of me, blah, blah, blah. And so Stephanie decided to try to find a community classroom that they can go have this class at. Lena also reveals that Monty is requiring that she get signed permission slips from every kid that attends this class, even if it is off school property. So far, Lena's only gotten 2 permission slips though, so doesn't look like this class is going too well. The moms then tell Jude, hey, you should invite Noah to the class, and Jude looks a little uncomfortable but says that he will. Later on, he says Noah can't make it to the class, so we think. Now, it's the day of the class, and Steph and Lena are worried, thinking that maybe, we should have canceled it, no one's gonna be here, there was only 2 kids to sign up. And when they walk into the classroom, they see a pretty good-sized group of kids waiting for them, maybe like 10 to 15 kids. Lena's like, oh no, hey, you guys didn't get me permission slips, we can't really be here. And then one of the girls speaks up saying, I couldn't really get you a signed permission slip because my parents don't know about me yet, and I'm not ready for that yet, and I don't think they're ready for that. And it seems like some of the other kids in the class obviously feel the same way since they don't have permission slips. And at this time, Noah actually shows up to the class, and Jude looks a little shocked, so we're guessing Jude never actually asked Noah to go to the class, but Lena had sent Noah's mom a permission slip, so Noah showed up. Steph then asks Lena, what are you gonna do about Monty if she finds out that you're gonna have this class without these permission slips? You could get in trouble. Lena then says, basically, whatever happens, happens. I can't turn these kids away. Basically, they need a safe place to be who they are. So the teacher starts the class, and is trying to kind of break the ice, so she asks if anybody has questions, and the first person to raise their hand happens to be Noah. Now later on, before the wedding's about to start, Noah asks Jude what he thought about the sex ed class, and Jude says, I don't know. And Jude's obviously been a little awkward for a while because he thinks Noah's pretty experienced when it comes to the whole sex thing. Jude tells Noah, man, you really asked a lot of questions. I thought you kind of already knew all about this. Noah then responds saying, I don't know everything. Jude says, but wait, haven't you had sex with 3 people? And then Noah's like, yeah, no, don't know where you got your information. I haven't had sex with anyone, so he's never done that. He says, I've done other things. Then they both kind of ask each other, do you want to have sex? Or, do you want to have sex? And they both reveal that they're not quite ready for real sex, but Noah asks Jude, hey, you want to do something else? And Jude smiles. Now let's move on to the Emma, Jesus, Brandon drama. Emma shows up at the house, and Brandon opens the door and tells her Jesus isn't really feeling well, and Emma reveals she doesn't have the heart to really tell Jesus everything face to face. She couldn't figure out how to do it, so she wrote it all down in a letter. Brandon tells her, Jesus says he's sorry about everything, and Emma says he shouldn't be sorry. He's not being paranoid. There is something going on between us, Brandon. Now, obviously, if you watched the promo for this episode a few weeks ago, it made it look like Emma was gonna confess something like, I love you to Brandon, or something like that. But in reality, Emma's just saying, there is something going on between you and me. It's the secret that we are trying to keep together. Emma then hands Brandon the letter and says, can you give this to Jesus? So Brandon goes and gives the letter to Jesus. Jesus later is trying to kind of read this letter, but he can't, and all the words are jumbled, and he kind of gets really frustrated. And so he later again tries to read this letter, but he can't. And then in walks Grandma Sharon with his meds. Now she asks, how you doing? What's going on? And Jesus says, oh, I'm doing all right. I just got this letter from Emma. I'm trying to read it, but I can't. And so Grandma Sharon offers to read the letter for him. She starts reading it, and the letter from Emma basically says, I love you, Jesus, and I loved you even when we were friends with benefits. But then Grandma Sharon kind of stops reading when she sees the paragraph about the pregnancy that says, Emma says, I was pregnant. Goes on to obviously talk about the abortion and everything. And instead of reading these paragraphs aloud to Jesus, she kind of skips them and then skips ahead to the paragraphs at the end. And you know, she says, you know, Emma's just looking for a little reassurance through this whole tough time and whatever. And Jesus is like, okay, cool. But Grandma says, you know, you should read this letter for yourself when you're feeling better. When Grandma leaves, Jesus then, you know, sends a message to Emma saying, you know, I'm not mad at you. Don't worry about anything. We're good. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I love you. Things are good. Emma later comes over for the wedding and asks Jesus again, you know, hey, are we okay? Because from that text message, she thinks Jesus has read the whole letter and is okay with everything that she's gone through. And Jesus goes, yeah, we're okay. Brandon and Emma are later talking when he asks what Jesus said about the letter, and Emma tells him that Jesus isn't mad, he understands everything. Little does she know, right? Then Grandma walks out and sees Emma and asks her to come help her with her dress. Grandma then tells Emma that Jesus asked her to read the letter, but that she didn't read it all to him. She kind of figured it wasn't her place to read that out loud to him. And Grandma says, you know, hey, Emma, I support you. And then she asks Emma if her parents know, and Emma says no, and also, you know, Steph and Lena don't know because I didn't want to tell them because I didn't think Jesus would be okay with that, so no one really knows but Brandon. Grandma promises that she is not going to tell anyone and that she really just needed to know that Emma was okay after reading that letter, and they have a really nice moment and a really nice hug. So Emma now knows that obviously Jesus doesn't really know the whole truth, and so she's talking to Jesus again, and they're trying to find their name cards on the table, and she asks Jesus, you know, if he read the letter himself, and this is when Jesus gets a little defensive and says, you know, can we just stop talking about this? We're good. And Emma says, you know, hey, I don't see our cards anywhere. And Jesus responds saying, yeah, neither do I, but in fact, he's standing right in front of the cards, and Emma looks down and sees this and realizes he can't read, which explains why Grandma would have read the letter to him. Emma later tells Brandon, you know, I made a mistake. Jesus didn't read the whole letter and because he can't read. And then she goes, you know, I'll explain all this to you later. And at this moment, you kind of pan back and you see Jesus seeing Brandon and Emma talk again. Part of me is hoping that Jesus isn't going to get paranoid again and that Emma will finally come clean to Jesus. So while things seem to be a little on the rocks for Jesus and Emma, let's move on to Brandon, who seems to be possibly getting some new love. Now Brandon is set to play the music at Grandma Sharon's wedding, but since Matt and Mariana broke up, Matt's not around to accompany him. So he's asked Grace, the music therapist, to come and help him. And Grace says, you know, I'm happy to help you, but I gotta leave by 6 because I gotta go do some stand-up comedy at an open mic night. And Brandon seems obviously a little shocked by this, and Grace reveals she recently read a book and was inspired by it and is now trying to do one thing a day that scares her, and today's thing was stand-up comedy. Now since Grandma's having cold feet about the wedding, everything's been pushed back and delayed, so she's not gonna make her open mic night, and Brandon suggests, hey, you know, while we're waiting, get up on that microphone in the backyard and try out your comedy, maybe entertain the crowd. Grace gives it a shot. And of course, her jokes aren't really that funny, but she's done something that scares her. I gotta give her some props because I don't think I could get up in front of a crowd and just do that out of the blue. And Brandon agrees because he tells Grace, you know, that took guts. And then Grace turns and kisses him. And Brandon looks a little shocked, but of course happy. And Grace says, you know, that was my one scary thing for tomorrow. Now it's time to catch up with Callie. Last we left her off, we know she is now going to trial. This episode, we first see Steph and Callie together, and Steph is telling Callie, you know, you don't gotta put a brave face on. It's okay to be worried, and you know, but we're gonna get you out of this. You're not gonna go to prison because there's no proof that you actually caused this accident. Callie, however, still seems to be hung up on the fact that Troy didn't take the money, especially since he is in so much debt. The next day at school, we see AJ and a girl named Dawn, and they're laughing and having a good time and supposedly talking about baked goods and kind of what seems like flirting more than just a normal conversation. Callie walks up as these two are talking, and AJ introduces Callie as his girlfriend to Dawn, and he sort of says, hey, this is Dawn. We were just talking about the bake sale, and then there's some jokes about AJ's homemade cinnamon buns, and then Dawn leaves and AJ and Callie go off together. Callie makes a joke saying, oh, maybe you two can kind of date when I'm in prison. So she's obviously seen the little bit of flirtatiousness between AJ and Dawn. And AJ's just kind of like, huh? But Callie basically just seems pretty frustrated, and she says she's tired of waiting when it comes to this whole trial. And then she asks AJ, you know, hey, what are you doing after school? What does Callie have in mind for after school? some trouble, of course. We then see Callie and AJ sitting in their car in the parking lot of a dive shop, and AJ jokes, asking Callie, hey, have you taken up scuba diving? Is there something I should know? And that's when Callie says, we're here because Troy worked here, and he was working here the day of Mrs. Johnson's murder. And then AJ starts to kind of freak out. And Callie says she just wants to ask this Vanessa Martin person who gave him an alibi what really happened that day. Once again, Callie is kind of snooping where she shouldn't. AJ tells Callie, hey, you're not talking to anyone. You're not going into that store. So he gets out of the car and goes inside the store. And he tells the girl at the desk, hey, I used to work in the store a long time ago. I used to work with someone named Vanessa Martin. I'm looking for so that I can get a letter of recommendation for a new job. The girl then says, oh, Vanessa hasn't worked here in a while, but if you really need to get a hold of her, you should ask her boyfriend. AJ's kind of like, oh, who's her boyfriend? And the girl goes, him. And Troy walks up, and he is still working at this store. Thankfully, Troy doesn't know who AJ is, otherwise this would have been a really bad thing. So AJ kind of delivers this fake story, and I don't know if Troy's buying it because he's like, I've worked here for 5 years, I don't remember you. But he tells AJ, give me your name and number and I'll help Vanessa get in touch with you. And so AJ writes down a fake name and number. He writes down like the name Chris. So then AJ goes and gets back in the car and tells Callie what he's learned. And Callie's kind of excited by this news because it kind of confirms that Troy is dating the person who gave him his alibi, which means that she could have just lied and done anything for him. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, some banging happens on the car window. Everyone freaks out, and Troy's scary ass face is right there in the window yelling at Callie, and he's like, I have you on tape, what are you doing here in the parking lot? This is harassment, you gotta go. And Callie immediately drives off. Now as everyone is getting ready for the wedding, AJ goes up to Callie's room and sees that she's on the computer looking at Vanessa Martin's Facebook page. Little crazy, right? AJ seems confused as well, and Callie reveals that Mariana sent Vanessa a friend request, and she accepted it because, if Callie had sent a friend request, she probably wouldn't have accepted it. Now, AJ definitely wants no part of this and goes downstairs. Now, all of the events at the dive shop and then this seem to be pushing AJ to his breaking point, and rightfully so. Callie eventually comes downstairs and asks AJ if he's mad, and AJ then says kind of what we've all been thinking, at least I've been thinking for a little bit. He tells Callie not everything is about you. He then tells her that he just found out that Mike only wants to adopt him so Anna can move in with the baby. Now Callie then says, hey, I don't really think that's the only reason that Mike wants to adopt you. There's gotta be a little bit more to this story. Why didn't you tell me sooner? And AJ snaps back saying, because all we talk about is you. Amen. Sorry, Callie, I kind of gotta agree with AJ. You're being a little selfish. Now, Callie plays the, but I might be going to jail soon card, and AJ snaps back saying, whose fault is that? You gotta stop messing with Troy. What did you think is gonna happen? And then Callie says, Troy's crazy, and I'm gonna prove it. She's just found out that Vanessa was married 4 years ago, and maybe her and Troy were having an affair, and that's why she's lying. And Callie just wants to talk to Vanessa's ex-husband, and all of this. And AJ is just like, you know what? No, I'm over this. Callie, you're your own worst enemy. And then Callie goes, you know what? I thought you wanted to help me. And AJ responds with this.
I'm a black man in America, Callie, with a juvenile record, and I don't have a rich daddy to buy me the best lawyers. If I make trouble and get arrested, I'm going down. Just like Ty.
I'm sorry, Callie. Like I said, I gotta be on AJ's side for this one. He makes a very good point. AJ then tells, Callie, hey, I love you. I would do anything for you, but I am not following you down this rabbit hole. So it looks like things aren't too good in the land of AJ and Callie, and from the looks of the promo for next week, things are not getting any better.
Are we okay?
I just want you here with me.
I'm here now.
Maybe AJ just needs a little bit of reassurance.
The Fosters.
Okay, to sum up this episode, Grandma Sharon and Will didn't get married. Lena and Steph got divorced and married all in this one episode. Brandon may have a new love in his life. Jude and Noah are ready to take the next step, or maybe half step in their relationship. Jesus still doesn't know that Emma was pregnant and had an abortion. And he might still think possibly that something's going on with Brandon and Emma. And Callie and AJ are definitely on the rocks, and Callie is just sitting there digging herself a deeper hole, and the trial is coming up. Now, it is time for you to get talking in the comments below, what was your favorite moment from this episode? What do you think will happen with AJ and Callie now, also that especially Dawn is in the picture? Will Jesus ever find out the truth about Emma's abortion? What's gonna happen with Callie's trial? There are just so many questions. So leave me all your thoughts, as always, and then be sure to check out some of my most recent interviews right over here with some fellow Freeform people and Disney Channel kids. And then also subscribe so you don't miss any of my interviews or recaps or anything else that happens to pop up on my channel. As always, I am Lisa, and I will see you next week. Thanks for hanging with me.